Hi, it's me, Kimberly Clark, the original de-influencer, and I'm using my experience as an anti-consumerist YouTube beauty guru to help you realize that you are more than the material. This is how to stop shopping in 5 easy steps.
It's what I'm not gonna buy, just to be not gonna lie. I am more than this, I am so much more.
Up until this point, we've been dealing with the what, the who, and the how. What consumerism is, who suffers most from corrupt capitalist systems, and how companies interact with us via marketing. But in this step, we'll start examining the why. Why are we so easily driven to consume? The answer is complicated, to say the least. There are so many factors that affect us from the outside, as well as so many desires and needs within ourselves that we seek to fulfill with shopping. We'll deal with all of these and more, but let's start with you. Think about the last time you shopped compulsively. That is, the last time you bought something that you didn't necessarily plan on buying or that you didn't necessarily need. Where were you? At home? In a store? On your way from one place to another? Online? On your phone? On your phone in a specific room? In your car? What time of day was it? Were you in a hurry? Did you have a lot of time? Were you alone? With other people? Had you just interacted with a certain person? Had you just watched a particular video or seen a specific friend or influencer's post? How did you feel before you made your purchase? How did you feel immediately after you made your purchase? How do you feel now? If you like, you can pause this video and write down the answers to these questions for reference. Note as much as you can about where you were, what you were doing, and how you felt. I'll wait. Now think about other times you've shopped. Think about when, where, why, and how you usually do it. Do you always buy something when you're in a particular place or on your way to or from a particular place, like on your way home, for instance? Do you always buy something on a certain day of the week? Is it a day you look forward to, your special weekend treat? Do you find that you do most of your shopping at certain times of the day, perhaps via apps like Outlook or eBay or Pinterest, right before you go to bed? Perhaps shopping is a social activity. Does purchasing something not only have a material payoff, but a social one, and not necessarily in person, but online? Do you share everything you buy? Or do you keep it a secret, even from your family, closest friends, or your spouse? Do you shop when you feel a certain way, maybe when you feel sad or powerless, or out of control, or lost, or lonely, or bored? Can you not avoid a sale? Does the idea of saving money overshadow any actual need you might have at the time? Or maybe shopping is a reward. Maybe you've accomplished a physical goal or completed a task. Perhaps the simple circumstance of having money to spend is enough reason to celebrate. Regardless of what the answers to these questions are, they must be clear to you in order for you to proceed. For some, these questions have never been considered, but for most of us, we already know the answers, but just haven't admitted them to ourselves. As before, it might be helpful to notate when you shop in a journal or as a memo. Make a list of everything you buy. Write down the time, location, and as much information about the circumstances as you'll need to visualize an image of your state of mind in these instances. You can even write a few words about how you're feeling in the moments before, during, and after shopping. Once you've collected data about your behavior, take a step back. What patterns do you see? Is there a specific state of mind that you often find yourself in before you shop? Let's call this your spending state. In the next step, we'll develop specific strategies to help you either avoid, escape, or recover from this mode. So the more details you have about it, the more success you'll have in overcoming it. If you ever feel lost, you could always go back and answer the questions in the previous part of this video to help you reconnect to the roots of your compulsion. These are the circumstances of your personal consumerism, the bad influences, the tempting situations, the issues, people, or places you use shopping to distract yourself from. We must be honest with ourselves as to what these triggering people, places, and things are in order to combat them. But they're not the only things that compel us to spend. Step back even further. Are there any long-term trends in your state of mind over the course of many days, weeks, years of shopping? Is there generally something you're seeking when you spend? What problems are you repeatedly trying to solve? What are you really looking for? As you stand back from your shopping experiences, you'll probably see that the fundamental reason you consume is because you want to be happy, to seek out joy. Marie Kondo's decluttering method, outlined in The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, has a similar and often overlooked step that relates to this visualization. She writes about discovering that deep down we all just want to find happiness. It's precisely why you're on this journey with me right now, and it's important to distinguish this path of self-betterment from that of consumerism. Yes, the act of purchasing and acquiring something new might bring temporary bliss, but in reality, the salve that is shopping is just that, a temporary patch for the surface wound, not the root of your unhappiness. This acceptance and refocusing is difficult because many of us were raised in a culture that values materialism and equates consumerism to success or being good. Take Santa Claus. When you think about it, it's kind of ridiculous that so many of us were raised to think that if we were nice and not naughty, we would get more presents on Christmas Day. My niceness, aka treating other people with respect, not causing anybody else harm, and being considerate of other people's boundaries, wasn't something anyone thought I would understand as something good to do unless they promised me whatever mass-produced plastic toy was trending that year. I remember being around 10 or 11 and having the uncomfortable realization that I was a spoiled brat. I was the only child of 2 working parents and the youngest of my cousins that I grew up in a house with. All of us basically raised and doted upon by my grandma Madeline, who you already met. Not to mention, I was the cutest kid ever. This means I always got what I wanted, even if I had to throw a temper tantrum in the middle of a Toys R Us to get it. I also grew up in the 90s, when consumerism was on the rise in many burgeoning industries, including electronic toys and games. I still have my SNES, by the way. But once I realized that I could get whatever I wanted, the getting seemed less exciting. Looking back, it was my first acknowledgement of privilege, a journey that I continue on today. Perhaps this revelation came about because of my expanded awareness of the experiences of people that were not like me. Kids who didn't get whatever they wanted. Maybe at the time I was developing compassion, empathy, and for the right reasons, not because I wanted to get on some fictitious elf's nice list. I think the idea of rewarding children with material things for being good or doing well in school or at sports is generally problematic in any culture, but I also acknowledge the good intentions of wanting to do right by your kids in every way possible. I remember understanding this at an early age as well, or at least partially. Christmas morning for me, as an only child, was about putting on a gratitude show for my parents. I would wake up before them and walk from my room to their room with my hands held up to my face like horse blinders, so as not to catch a glimpse of the display of presents they had set up under the tree for me the night before. I'd wake them up and tell them it was time. Then I'd scurry back to my room and hide out until they were up and ready to receive me. When they were in place, I'd make my grand entrance. I'd turn the corner from my bedroom and behold what was under the tree. Piles of presents for me and 2 smaller ones that my parents had prepared for each other. I was legitimately in awe. My face lit up with wonder and astonishment. But my favorite part was seeing how my parents would react to my reaction. They were always so proud, so happy, and there was something that I loved so much about them watching me be so overjoyed at what they were able to provide. They genuinely loved watching me be surprised and full of joy, and I loved watching their pride for being able to provide me with such an amazing experience for so many years. Looking back, all of those plastic toys and books and clothes wrapped in shiny paper were definitely tokens of the problematic consumerist culture we were all participating in, but they were also something else. See, my parents worked hard to be able to provide for me a life that was better than theirs. When they looked at that little boy with all those presents, mountains more than either of them had growing up in their working class households, they felt gratified. They felt like they got closer to achieving the American dream that both of their immigrant families came here for. I think that this is a universal tenet, at least in American culture, this utilization of consumerism to represent advancement in society. It relates to the conspicuous consumption we discussed in step 1, a representation of wealth, or at least a projection of success in order to be part of something bigger than oneself. It's about status, and parents want their kids to succeed as much, if not more, than they have. It's a very American desire, and while shared by all, it becomes much more dire when it intersects with various types of systemic oppression, like classism, racism, or sexism. For many, attaining status can also be about survival. But what is this American dream, and whose is it really? I think it's safe to say that the curtain is pulled further back on the machinations of global capitalism than it's ever been. Today, labor union uprisings are exposing the radically unjust distribution of wealth from companies that make billions of dollars, but only share a minuscule portion of that with the actual laborers keeping those companies alive. We see this in industries from shipping to transportation to manufacturing to entertainment. And hopefully, when all is said and done, even if the unions that are risking it all to strike and protest don't get all of their demands met, we will still all remember this exposing of the wildly unjust distribution of wealth that capitalism has created. In America, our entire society, all of the wealth and power we've attained was built on the backs of enslaved Africans, exploited migrant workers, and of course began with the genocide of the indigenous people of the Americas. And as discussed in my last video, our wealth and economy is still built on the backs of forced laborers around the globe. But none of this is new information. We may know more about the degrees of exploitation of our current capitalist system now, but the writing's always been on the wall. What prevents us from reading it and rewriting our society's story? I told you in my last video about how my Italian ancestors had to integrate into American society and how honing the craft of sewing was a positive result of that process. But so much of becoming American meant leaving behind what you were. And for my ancestors, they weren't just becoming American, they were becoming white. Italians, like certain other European immigrants, were not considered white when they arrived in the early 20th century. Today, white supremacists would like us to believe that race is this inherent, obvious, and defining characteristic, but we don't need to look back too far in our own history to see that many groups of people were able to become white by leaving behind other signifying aspects of their identity and uniting with other people who had sacrificed their cultures in order to claim superiority over others. See, whiteness isn't a culture. It's defined only by the marginalization of others. Whiteness only exists if there are non-white people to exploit, oppress, and steal wealth from. And because its only defining factor is that it is oppressive, there isn't room for any other cultural ideas like, say, multilinguality or expansive views on gender or non-nuclear family models. It's why my grandmother never learned how to speak Italian. If her family really wanted to become American, become white, they had to leave behind anything that could potentially other them from the mainstream. When an entire way of being is defined by exploiting other cultures to gain wealth and power, it needs a secondary system to manage and represent that wealth and power. This secondary system is what we know as consumerism. Although accumulating material wealth is part of the traditions of many societies, the particular way consumerism operates within global capitalism overwhelmingly favors the lives and experiences of white people and the countries they live in, while exploiting non-white people and the, as Aja Barber calls them, traditionally pillaged countries they live in. Basically, all the cultural norms, expectations, and workings of consumerism, like advertising, manufacturing, and distribution, are based in a white supremacist colonial mindset and are destructive and problematic because their origins are as vile, hubristic, and inhumane as can be. But you didn't think finding the roots of your compulsion would get this heavy, did you? This is a self-help methodology, but there is a very large, very powerful, and very problematic system that is behind all of this that we can't, frankly, fix by ourselves. But we also can't deny its existence just because it's too much or too big. We have to acknowledge it because we didn't just get to this deficient, compulsively consumerist state because of our own individual sins. This acknowledgement is difficult and depressing and can feel hopeless at times, but understanding the corrupt systems that we simply can't tackle on our own helps to separate them from the things that we can. You might be familiar with this concept if you've ever heard the Serenity prayer. It seeks serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So if the perpetuation of consumerism through global capitalism is a thing I cannot change, at least on my own at this moment, then what are some of the things that I can? How do I find the courage to do so? It might be obvious at this point, but I'll say it again. Right here and right now, the biggest change you can make is to stop shopping. Admit that the way we are told we need to consume has never given us the fulfillment it has claimed to. And if you resist buying that one thing, then it will be easier to not buy the next thing and the next and the next. The initial steps may be slow and frustrating, but once you start evaluating your anti-consumerism the way we evaluate our consumerism at the beginning of this video, you'll see that ultimately your happiness does not increase the more you consume, but the opposite. Buying fewer, immediately gratifying trinkets allows you to find greater joy in the things, the friends, the gifts you already have. This individual confrontation, this seeing consumerism for the con that it truly is, will not instantly change the world. The ads will still roll, the tankers will still spew greenhouse gases, the factories will still press plastic into adorable shapes that will never biodegrade. But one less soul will be sacrificed to the capitalist gods, and you will find freedom to pursue a life unhindered by compulsive shopping. See, when we excavate the foundation of who we are and remove the diseased roots of our consumerist compulsion, we will notice that there are many other roots already in place that connect us to joy. There's actually a vast network of connections that we may have forgotten, other lifelines that were previously being strangled by consumerism. These are important to discover because releasing a consumerist ideology can feel like falling without a net. It is the power to find happiness in the things we make and the communities we share. Humans have been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years before global capitalism was installed as the way of the world. The roots of our capacity for happiness go much, much deeper than those of this shallow consumerist system. And in the final two steps of this method, we will learn how to connect to this truth and to our shared network of joy that is stronger, healthier, and more sustainable than any capitalist structure can ever pretend to be. Congratulations! You've completed step 3 of how to stop shopping in 5 easy steps. Find the roots of your compulsion. If you'd like to support me and my work, consider sending me a tip on Venmo at Kim Clark Queen, or join the House of Clark by becoming a patron of mine on Patreon. Thanks to everyone that's continued to support me over the years. I wouldn't be here without you. Thanks for watching, and I'll meet you at step 4, create systems of self-care. As always, I'm Kimberly Clark. Bye!
Material.